Who is overrated or underrated in the 2023 rookie class? We have your cheat code to beat whatever mock or draft you're going to be doing tonight on Football Guys College Football Show.
What is up, everybody? Welcome back to the show. We appreciate you guys. Make sure you like, subscribe, leave a comment. Let us know, okay, what you're thinking of the show. Who are your overrated, underrated prospects of this class? We're going to be diving into it, but I'd be remiss not to say that if you need to know your rookies, if you're just now diving into your rookies, it's February, getting to March. We got Combine coming up. We're excited about that. Make sure you check out our rookie guide that we created here at Football Guys. It's really good. Just to show you another, just real quick what it can kind of look like. Bijan Robinson, you can see there. It's going to give you your strengths, your weaknesses, your scouting report, your ideal fits, everything there. And then as we get into the Combine, you're going to see other stuff pop up on version 2.0. And into 3.0, we'll have more of that with ideal fits. But hope you guys are ready, boys. We're going to be talking about some overrated, underrated prospects. So we're starting to get into that, kind of going over where they're at, their value. We're going to be looking at ADP. I believe Jeff got that from the, I don't know, the motherland of ADP out there.
So full disclosure, take that ADP with a massive grain of salt, because what I did was I went into Sleeper, started a mock draft, and I looked at where players were ranked. So that's probably not what you're likely to see published as ADP, and probably not what you're likely to see in a draft. But again, I think it's important to understand where players are ranked within that draft capsule. Especially if you're drafting soon, you want to know, like, Eric Gray is down at the bottom, and Eric Gray should not be down at the bottom, those types of things. And that's what we're here tonight to help you through.
And to your point, like, I actually had the DM Sleeper like a few days ago and say, hey, you missed this person. And they're like, oh, yeah, we'll get him in now. And they got him in. And so, like, the ADP is kind of all around the place. So, yeah. But it's good because I've been doing these rookie mocks pretty much the whole offseason, and we've been seeing this. And it's so funny how consensus ADP changes, too. It's funny how this works. You'll see one guy tweet something one day, and that night, that guy jumps up 5 spots. That was Christian Williams' special earlier in the year. It's like you see all those different groups. So, we're going to be talking about overrated, underrated, what we think of where their value is going to be like the next couple of months. And I thought we had a very good question today from somebody who obviously listens to our show. So we appreciate you guys. Like, if you're doing a draft before the real NFL draft, how do you approach those drafts? So we're going to dive into that as well. We'll talk about that and how we do that, especially with these guys. So you guys want to dive into the first guy?
Good.
Sean Tucker, Syracuse running back, definitely one of those guys that we've talked about on the show. I've seen him as high as running back 2 for some people. I've seen him as low as like running back 9 for some people. What are we thinking about him, Jeff?
Sean Tucker is falling in the overrated bucket. And, I think a lot of it is we're concerned when you watch the film on his, I think his contact balance is a concern, his ability to play through physicality is a concern. Once you get out in space, his speed can erase a lot of errors, but it's whether or not he has that ability to find that space, those creases at the NFL level, I think is going to be a major question.
Yeah, he's certainly one of those boomer bust type of guys where if he develops a little bit in terms of, getting a little bit stronger and running with a little more power and then not leaving as many yards on the field, I think that this is probably a decent range for him. But currently, with what we know, and I keep mentioning it and bringing it up, but a lot of NFL draft analysts are really low on this kid. And a lot of guys that are plugged in are kind of saying, hey, he might not get drafted as highly as maybe we're projecting, because he is going to be one of those combine warriors. So people are going to be pretty high on him coming out of the combine. But if the NFL isn't currently high on him, that all shows up on his tape. So I don't know how much that's actually going to change his draft projection. But yeah, right now, I mean, RB5 is much too rich for me. I think, slot him down 4 to 5 more spots, and then I'm fairly comfortable with it. But he's a name that a lot of people know too, and I think that's definitely bumping him up.
So I have a little bit of extra ADP for everybody out there, not just rookie. So Jeff, right now in a Dynasty startup, Would you rather have Sean Tucker or Cam Akers?
I would rather have Cam Akers. I think in a dynasty startup right now, I think when you look at the Saints, or not the Saints, the Rams depth chart, Akers clearly sits at the top there. They have to add another body, I would think, but we know how they stand with draft picks, and I do think that Akers, the way he finished last year, I don't think can be ignored. And once he really got healthy from that injury from the prior season, he looked much more comfortable when he came back to the team. And that is something that it stands in my mind. And we saw him perform as the top 5 fantasy running back down the stretch.
Okay.
Yeah, the way he finished the season last year was exactly what we're hoping Sean Tucker develops into. Cam Akers was also one of those guys for me that he needed to really develop over the first few years of his career, and he did that, and that's kind of where we're at. But when we talk about value and what that means for Sean Tucker, that means that he's probably going to lose some value before maybe he gains it back 2 years down the road. But that's a good question, because I do see those guys as prospects in a similar light.
I think the other thing too on Tucker is, what is he at the NFL level? Because in terms of being a pass catching back, we haven't really seen him used down the field. A lot of what we've seen is either some screen passes, or maybe a couple wheel routes occasionally. But I've seen people out there like, oh, he's got a passing skill set, and he caught a lot more passes this year, but a lot of those were very, very close to the line of scrimmage. And when you look at him averaging, I had a tweet last week, and it was what it is, but he had a 55-yard touchdown, and when he took that out, it was closer to 5 yards per reception, whereas Bijan Robinson's at 16 yards per reception, and it tells you where players are being used. And so if Sean Tucker isn't immediately a pass catching back at the NFL level, if he doesn't have that pass game development, if he's an early down back at the NFL level, he doesn't have that physicality to be an early down back at the NFL level. So you're I think the team that takes him, and that's probably why his draft stock would be a little bit lower. A team doesn't feel comfortable knowing what they're going to use him for, whereas they're going to make that bet on the athleticism. Maybe we can turn him into something, but I don't know if you're going to get that immediate return that you really, really crave out of the running back picks.
Yeah. And just for perspective, everybody out there, like if you're in a mock, or if you're, in a dynasty startup, which you are, because you're degenerates if you're listening to this show too, like other kind of veterans going around him. So Tucker's getting drafted before Khalil Herbert, David Montgomery, Miles Sanders, James Conner, Zeke, and Antonio Gibson. So if you're thinking of those names, Tucker's actually going before those guys. So that's where we're thinking of the overrated part and kind of the overvalued, which can be very difficult. Like when you're talking about that question, like he's a question mark. So that question earlier that someone asked, like when you come into the drafts, before even your rookie drafts, like how do you differentiate these guys? It's the safer prospects for me that I look for in those kind of situations, not the outliers. And I think that's what you have to be careful with. All right, let's go to the next guy. Number 1 pick, maybe Anthony Richardson, our guy, quarterback from Florida. What do we think of Anthony Richardson? Do you think he's underrated, overrated? There's a lot of nonsense on the stratosphere about Anthony Richardson, but let's cut the BS and let's get into it. So what do we think, Jeff?
He's underrated. Anthony Richardson is underrated. He's often going as the 4th quarterback selected in drafts. I think when you get in the dynasty rookie drafts, he's usually kind of that consensus running quarterback 3, which is probably good, fair value for him. But when I'm seeing out of, I'm stepping into redraft leagues a little bit right now. I have done some underdogs, and he's consistently been that 4th rookie quarterback. And I just think that draft capital is going to be much higher than what people are projecting. I understand the comparison that's running out there, and I think it's lazy, and it is what that is. And I'm going to go anymore entertain that, because I think that we've heard enough positive buzz from the jump on him, on being a player that is the athleticism is there, the size is there, the passing game ability is there. I think that there are some mechanical flaws that need to be cleaned up, and that's what's holding him back. But those are things that have been corrected in other prospects before.
Yeah. I have so many words on this one, but no, even so, take away the question marks, right? I think if you take away the question marks entirely and you just look at his profile, you understand what he can be in terms of fantasy football. And we know he has the rushing profile. And so instead of getting cute with it and trying to take the guy with maybe some a nice arm talent, why don't you just take the guy that you know is going to score fantasy points? Sigmund Bloom just wrote an awesome article about what we learned about quarterbacks in 2022 that I think is relevant. There's a nice little piece in there about rushing quarterbacks and how they impact fantasy. Everyone kind of knows that, but if you don't know that, you want a quarterback that can run. He can do that. The other piece of this, Bleacher Report recently moved him to QB2. CBS Sports is now projecting him to be the first overall pick. And this is ahead of the combine. So just imagine what this is going to be a week and a half from now when he goes out and runs a blazing 40, and he probably will throw if he's smart. And I think that he's going to put on a show at the combine. And we know that there is that potential to do that. Just get ahead of it now. That's we're asking you to get ahead of it now, because there's no reason he should be behind Will Levis. And I think you can make a legit argument that he can be in that first tier of quarterbacks.
Yeah, I think so. I think for fantasy purposes, you have to throw him in there, right? And if he's getting this buzz, like we never saw like 101 talk and all that stuff with Anthony. And I think it's one of those things where, we get questions a lot like, okay, where, will these guys last that long? I don't know. I don't think so. I think the quarterback position, I'm kind of on this thing this year where they're going to overcorrect. Last year, they thought they could hang and just go with the quarterback they had in their roster, and teams fell flat in their face. And I think this year they're going to overcorrect and draft these quarterbacks. So, no, I think he's underrated as well still. Like, I still think when you're looking at him overall, like, and there's very smart people out there, like very smart, way smarter analysts than me. And they're touting Anthony being like 102 if he goes top 10, like 102 super flex. Like, that's where they would draft him. And I think that's something to note when you're looking at this. So according to our ADP, he is underrated, just where he's at, where he's going, what his ceiling could be. But so let's put you on the spot, Jeff. If you're in a draft before the NFL draft, though, are you taking Anthony Richardson at the 102 to 105 mark?
I am entertaining it at the 104. I can't get him above Young or Stroud, but it's going to be interesting because in the combine, they go in alphabetical order, and he's going to go right before CJ Stroud. And so if he throws and Stroud throws, that could be a difficult spot for Stroud if Richardson goes out there and rips it, because I think that he does have a better arm than Stroud when you look at pure arm talent. If he goes out there and rips it and hits his spots, that'll be a tough thing for Stroud to follow up. But before the draft, I can't get him above the 104, but in my mind, I do think that he's going to be more consensus that 102 to 104 range when we get to it in 2 months than he is in like 110 range, 19 range, where you see him landing sometimes. And it's just, I don't know why you would want to fade an athletic quarterback. And yeah, I understand we got one wrong last year, but we got to, if you go back, there's other ones that have been right. And Justin Herbert was a player that was faded in his class, and that looks pretty foolish. And Josh Allen was a player everybody was willing to bail on, and people are ready to bail on Justin Fields. Even fantasy analysts are ready to bail on Justin Fields, and we know what he can produce when it comes to fantasy. So I would just be a little bit cautious on some of that stuff, because some of it is you're gambling and you're betting on ceiling, and Richardson has the ceiling to be the 102. Richardson has the ceiling to be the 101 out of this class if he hits in Superflex.
Yeah. Yep. Once again, I have so many words on this, but we're going to see the correction of his ADP here after the combine. I think that's important to note too. So if you're not drafting yet, if you're not a psycho like Jeff in underdog tournaments right now and drafts like that, then you're probably in good shape, because this should correct as soon as he runs a 4.4 something at 230 pounds or whatever the heck he is. I always forget his weight.
I think so too. I think we're all on the same page there, and I do think that when you're looking at just overall his talent, it's there, and I can't wait to the combine. The combine's gonna be a lot of fun to watch there. All right, let's go to the next guy. Kind of me and Christian's guy. We've been drafting him all over the place, but Eric Gray, Oklahoma running back. What do we think about this? So we put on here running back 23 on Sleeper. Overall, just looking at him, like, and in terms of rookie drafts, his ADP. Where's his ADP at in rookie drafts, Jeff?
Well, I pulled it at running back 23, but again, that's highly questionable ADP. Yeah, okay. That's just where he's in the module, and he's going to go higher than that. He's going really that third round is where I see him most often. Occasionally, maybe sneaking up into the second round if you're smart and you listen to and follow Football Guys, and you're taking him at the end of the second round. But I think he's more that third round guy right now. But again, Christian's been banging the bell on this since the beginning on him going in day 2, going in that higher tier of running backs, and I think that he's a screaming value right now. If you're going to draft your draft right now, outside of the two players, and we'll get to the other one, Dalton Kincaid kind of lands in that third round, and those two guys are just crazy to me of being able to take them in the third round.
Yeah, this is another one that I think does correct a bit after the combine, because I do. This is a guy that should test well. The explosives are certainly going to be there because the burst is all over his film. Once again, with him, I think it's a lot of people that play Dynasty have also dabbled in Debbie a little bit, and he's a guy that definitely burned people. Jeff, brought that up as a potential reason that these guys could be falling or their value stays low. And right now that's helpful because scooping Eric Gray where he's at is just an absolute steal. This is also a guy that, I said it, I think, when we did our last mock draft on here, but he's a guy that I'm comfortable if he falls to day 3, but he's like an early 4th round pick. He's a guy that I think can lead a committee and be an impactful player, especially, situation does matter and fit matters, but teams are drafting based on their scheme and their needs and things like that. So hopefully he gets to a nice situation, but yeah, right now, screaming value.
I think when you're looking at Gray too, it is not caught up. So when you're looking at it, like he's going in the 4th round of some rookie drafts that I've done for Football Guys. We do all the rookie drafts and stuff in the ADP. Deuce Vaughn's going ahead of him, which I question because Gray really profiles better than Deuce Vaughn does at the next level as an NFL runner. So yeah, I think Eric Gray's right there. Like overall, the process, you guys are right. He's underrated. Like right now, in terms of what we see, in terms of the value in the ADP, he is definitely underrated. He's one of those running backs in that 3rd or 4th. Like if you can get Eric Gray in the 3rd, that's what you should be shooting for. So like that is the type of runner that you're going for, and especially the late 3rd in that area where that ADP is going. And just by overall, like there's some guys getting like Dwayne McBride's getting drafted way higher than that. He's going like 207, 208 in some drafts. And so Eric Gray's going 307, 308, full round value difference. Like there's kind of those areas like to me, the way rookie drafts are playing out right now is that early 2nd is the running back landscape. Late 2nd is more the wide receiver tier 2-ish, 3-ish landscape. And in the 3rd round, you're generally just picking best player available at what you think. And I think that could be running back. That could be Gray. And I think that's what you look for. All right, next guy. Christian's been getting yelled about this guy on YouTube and all kinds of stuff. Jalen Hyatt, Tennessee wide receiver, wide receiver 6 on Sleeper and ADP. What do we think here? Overrated, underrated, Jeff?
You're gonna make me do this one. This is not even my guy to
right, Christian, go.
I'll do
it. Overrated, underrated. What do you got?
I think he's overrated. So the important piece of information here is that Jalen Hyatt is a very, very good deep ball receiver. He's a very good ball tracker. I still question his hands downfield, but he does track the ball well, and he's got blazing speed. There aren't that many guys with that profile that are fantasy relevant guys. I can think of a few, and obviously there are certain guys like Deshaun Jackson that were kind of broke fantasy with how well they were able to turn that into fantasy points. But when we're talking about, in PPR formats, Jalen Hyatt is going to be one of those boomer bust guys. He doesn't really have much on the underneath stuff. He doesn't really have much on the intermediate stuff. His in-breaking routes are just really raw. He still has a lot of developing to do. Wide receiver 6 on Sleeper. I think if I had to guess, though, in actual rookie drafts, he's probably like 4 to 5 because of the NFL draft hype that we're seeing for him. There are reports that he could be the first wide receiver off the board. And while everyone likes to put stock into draft capital, I think that's a very good decision. This isn't the type of profile that I want on my fantasy team, at least immediately, until he develops all that other possession type of stuff. So I think he's overrated. I'm also the outlier on the show for these guys. They like him a lot more than I do. But even wide receiver 6, I think compared to the rookie guide, I think that's still a little bit overvalued. So I made it out.
Do you think Deshaun Jackson coming out into the league, do you think he would have been used different in the current NFL than he was when he came out? Because I do. I mean, I think we would see a different type of player. We saw his explosive ability in the punt return game. I think that they would do a lot better job scheming him in the short and intermediate game and getting him in the space, letting him operate with the ball after the catch. And those are things that I think Hyatt has in his game. And I understand that not having a developed route package and not having a developed release package is a lot of that concern there. But I do think that you can get around some of those things because that speed is so deadly that if you're putting him out on an island and you're getting a bump and run corner on him, and outside of Sauce Gardner, who's allowed to hold him and hug him and do whatever he wants to do, I mean, he gets behind you at 6 points, and that is the one thing that holds out there. And I largely agree with you on boomer bust prospects, and especially those receivers that attack vertically being so boomer bust and using high draft capital on those players. Very skeptical on that. At the same time, I just think that we've seen transitions within the NFL game that would allow him to be utilized differently. And if he goes in the mid first round, like we are seeing some projections out there, that I think that team is going to embrace that and really develop that package a lot quicker than, maybe if he slides back a little bit or he lands on a really developed, strong receiving core that doesn't need him to make that development.
So here's the thing for me. I think 6 is actually properly rated. Like, that's why I can't say he's over or underweight, because like he's kind of going in that tier where I'm like, yeah, okay, I'll take that. Like, so in when you're looking at drafts, it's really JSN, Jordan, and Quentin Johnson. They're kind of pretty much going interchangeable 1, 2, 3. Then you got Downs, Boutte, and Flowers. That generally seems to be the consensus 6-ish, like kind of where they're at. And then Hyatt's kind of right there after that, but he's kind of going like a full round, like 209, 208, 207. So like, to me, he's borderline. He's teetering it. But to Jeff's point, as soon as he gets drafted in the first round, which we all think he probably will, he's going to probably get up to that wide receiver 4. And then that's where you have to make your decision. Okay, is he overrated, underrated here? And I think that's the biggest kind of question that we have. That's going to be the question mark moving forward with him. But so Christian, would you rather have Kayshawn or Jalen Hyatt then? If he gets your first round draft capital, let's just say Kayshawn gets second round.
I'll take a shot on Boutte at that point.
Jeff, same thing?
I like Boutte's game in a PPR format to be able to develop a little bit more. Okay. I just think that there are things that in his game that translates very well. And again, middle of the first versus late second, that's one of the things that I pushed hard on Chris Olave versus Sky Moore last year. Whereas Chris Olave was the 12th pick in the NFL draft. Sky Moore was a mid to late second round pick. And I understand he landed with Kansas City, but I thought it was crazy that people were taking Sky Moore over top of Chris Olave and, laying on the analytical profiles there and whatnot. I do think that at some point, if Jalen Hyatt is a top 10 pick in the NFL draft, you have to take him, I think, in that first round range, depending on where in a player like Kayshon Boutte, I think we've seen enough red flags around his game.
I want to clarify. I would take a running back and not take either of those players.
You can't do that. Don't be pulling no Twitter crap, okay? Don't be like, hey, what player do you want? I'll take the first round 24 pick. I hate that. If you do that on social media, you are the worst, okay? You know who I'm talking about. Oh, Jacob Sanderson, you kill me every time. Like, I don't understand. Like, every time I put a poll out, you yell at me and you say, I'm going to pick this one. Stop doing that, okay? Stop ruining my engagement farming.
You don't say Jacob.
I love Jacob too. I say the same thing.
We love
Jacob.
Him.
Yeah, engagement farming. Stop ruining my engagement farming. All right, let's go to Tank. Tank Bixby, running back from Auburn, running back 10 on Sleeper. Where do we think this guy, Jeff, underrated, overrated?
Tank Bixby is underrated. So I think that we see him as being more of that, at least that early down back, maybe even that 3-down skill set, and a player that I think will catch higher draft capital than he's being recognized. I know there's a lot out there about Darquez Hunter had a role in that Auburn receiving or rushing game, and that knocked Tank Bixby down, and whatever other reason you want to come up with. But I do think that Tank Bixby is a little bit of a case of prospect fatigue, because that was a player that everybody was so very, very high on as a true freshman, and we were just kind of waiting for him to get around. And then I think everybody got tired of talking about Tank Bixby, and he just kind of fell down the board a little bit.
Yeah. Tank Bixby, to me, it falls into that Eric Gray bucket too, where he had a great freshman year, and then he kind of burned people that play Devy and hybrid dynasty formats. in that sophomore year because Auburn just didn't have a ton around him. And while I think that was certainly the case again this year, we saw that he was able to develop and able to overcome some of those things. I think it actually is going to be helpful for him because he learned how to create yards. I think when Tank came in as a freshman, he was very much so I'm going to take what is given to me type of player. And that worked because he was bursty and he's got the ability to run off chunk runs. But this year at Auburn, like there were still guys in the backfield. It's just he got so much more creative with the ball in his hands. And I think NFL teams are going to see that. I think that's going to be one where like some NFL draft analysts are saying, oh, I can't believe he snuck into day 2. And that is expected to me. Like, I think he's a locked in 3rd round pick if I had to guess right now.
I love our comp for him in the rookie guide. Like, I think that it's a really good one. Josh Jacobs. I think that fits him really well in terms of like, hey, maybe not the best pass catching guy, but he can be that kind of traditional between the tackles guy. Yeah, look at that. See, look at that. It's like we have a producer on the show. Thank you, Becker, the producer. But when you're looking at that, like can create the chunk plays, does those little things. He's not going to be huge, like as far as a runner speed guy, but he definitely fits that profile, right? Like he's someone, and he's going to that 2nd round tier. So, Devin Achane, you're looking at, Tucker's going to be in there, Zach Evans, Charbonnet, like he's going in that middle tier. But he is at times going like 210 after all those guys. And I think that is where he becomes underrated, extremely underrated, because again, I think prospect fatigue has happened a little bit with some of these guys. And I think that's for Tank as well. And Tank has produced pretty well in some bad spots. Like when you're thinking about his offenses that he didn't have, his new head coaches, like 2 different new head coaches, different schemes, porous offensive line, terrible quarterback play. Well, maybe not his first year. Sorry, I didn't want to shit on Bo Nix. Sorry, Christian. But after that, he had pretty bad quarterback play. So overall, like, yeah, I think he's underrated as well. All right, let's talk about the little guy, Deuce Vaughn. Where is he going? Running back 4 on Sleeper. Are you sure about that, Jeff?
All I'm saying is when you go in and load a draft and you look at where guys are in the draft, he is all the way at running back 4, and that's not his ADP, and he's going later than that. But again, I do think he's still going too high. I think he's overrated, and I don't know. I think it's one of those that, yeah, I could see him having a passing down role in the NFL. I don't know if the explosives are there the way that he showed in college. And if you don't have those big explosives, a player that not physique wise, that stylistic type comp, but Kenny Gainwell is kind of a player that stands in my mind where the Dynasty community has been so in on Kenny Gainwell for the last 2 years, just waiting for literally anything to happen with him. And yeah, he had a couple touchdowns this year and you felt a little bit better about that. But in his draft class, he was all the way up. People had him as running back 3, running back 4, and were taking him aggressively at the early 2nd round. And it's just a limited role. You're immediately stepping into a limited role. And it's not the type that, as much as you can talk about Devin Achane as a player that he might have a limited role because of his size as well in a different area. He does have the explosives. He is able to break a 60-yard run and score you that touchdown there. I don't know that Vaughn carries that into the NFL level. I don't know that he has the top end speed to do that. And I think a guy gets his hand on him, he's going to go down.
Yeah, I think that's really important. I do think while Deuce looked creative in the Big 12, he really didn't even break tackles in the Big 12. And so you take a step up and you say, well, can he provide something in the passing game? I think he can, for sure. I think he can give you a couple catches here and there. But, I've seen people saying he looks like Austin Eckler. No, he doesn't. Also, he's 20 pounds lighter than Austin Eckler. And I think that that's going to be important. Size matters in the NFL, for sure. We say this every year. Even the guys that are like size outliers, Bryce Young, we're not out on him, but he has elite traits in other areas. I just don't see that singular elite trait that Deuce Vaughn has. I think he's a good pass catcher. I think there are 4 guys that are above 200 pounds that are just as good, if not better. So it's just a guy that profile is not something I'm interested in, especially with how high he is going to end up going, because once again, that's a name that a lot of people know, despite being a lesser known guy than obviously the Bijan Robinson and maybe even Jahmyr Gibbs's of the world. But yeah, I'm out. I saw Ant-Man over the weekend too. That's the new comp. Ant-Man. He's Ant-Man.
Ant-Man would dominate the NFL. Just saying.
That's true. That's true.
He would. Yeah. And I don't know. After going to the Expo, I can't talk about anybody's looks. All right, let's go. Like, yeah, I think Deuce Vaughn, 100%. Like, Deuce Vaughn's one of those players that we're going to be talking about, like, oh, yeah, I had to plug in Deuce Vaughn like in 4 years. I had to plug in Deuce Vaughn because I have a bunch of injuries and he catches passes. Like, that's going to be the Deuce Vaughn role of like all these guys that we talk about, because he'll stay in the league. He's got talent, but he's not someone that, like, if you're going to put in a second round draft capital, I think that's too much. I think it's overrated if you're going to take him there, because I just don't think you're going to get the return on that investment at all in your guys' leagues, especially with the talent that's in that class. All right, Tyjae Spears, underrated, running back 12. We know Christian. What do we think here, Christian?
Oh yeah, super underrated. Tyjae's my RB4 currently. I'm one of the highest I've seen on him in even draft spheres. I think I've gotten into a little bit more tape, and there are times that he does bounce runs a little bit more than you'd like, but when he does it, a guy his size, you'd expect him to go down easily, kind of like Deuce Vaughn, and he just doesn't. He's a very physical runner despite his smaller size. He's over 200 pounds, but he's still a slender type of kid. He's got room to add to that frame and really take on a larger workload than I think most people projected initially. That said, he's not one of those names that people know just yet. And come, late March, I would say that this value is going to creep up to a point that maybe even I would say, well, let's pause. Probably not, though. If he's my RB4, I don't think he's going to get that high. But just a guy that I think can be productive in a lot of different areas. He is a guy that can catch passes. He does have that pass blocking ability. And he's a good runner. He's a much better runner than you'd expect. So, Jeff, do you agree that he's underrated at RB12?
Man, Christian, I don't know how you can just buy into the Senior Bowl hype, and don't you evaluate players before the Senior Bowl, and now you're just going to move him up to be a first-round pick and the top 5 running back just only because of the Senior Bowl?
Yep. That is always the case here on this show. We wait until the Senior Bowl and then we start talking about guys. That's no, I think that also is going to boost his value, though. And I think that's a good talking point, that like now people do know the name a little bit more. So just, I would caution people, if it gets too high, nothing's too high for me with Tyjae, but I know that there will be a ceiling for like you guys where he might creep up to, for example.
Yeah, I think it's important to know early in draft season. There is no consensus early in draft season. And so a lot of what you see of underrated players, or I don't understand why everybody's so low on this player. And it's just rankings correction. It's moving guys to the proper place that they should be in rankings. And it's not that you were low on him. It's that you started with kind of a messy consensus, that a lot of what happens is not a lot of people make their own lists, and a lot of people kind of go off what they can find, and then things get kind of augmented and moved around or whatever it might be. And then we work through the process, and we kind of, a lot of times when it comes to ADP across the broad range, ends up very narrow once you get to the draft. And the same thing happens in redraft. When you look at just the NFL every single summer, and early in redraft, when you're making your rankings, they can be more all over the board. And then once you kind of get to August and all those drafts are going in, the things narrow. And that's just one of the things that it's not an overcorrection from the Senior Bowl. It's just ranking correctly.
Yeah, no, and to your credit with Spears, real quick, we'll just go back to that. Like, he's going in the 3rd round right now. I'll take that shot all day. Like, I think that's going to definitely vault up, but like, he's going after Izzy. He's going a little bit after Rashawn Johnson. Like, he's going right around Vaughn, McIntosh, like those places. Like, okay, I'll take a shot on Spears at that point. Like, so I think he's still underrated, but again, like Christian pointed out, like, and I don't be putting words in my mouth. I don't not like Spears. You're just very high on Spears, where
I didn't say you guys dislike him. It's just
no.
Don't like him like I like him.
Okay, I just want to make sure listeners know out there, like, he's putting words in my mouth. No, all right, let's go. CJ Johnson made the list. I'm not sure why does CJ Johnson on this list, Jeff?
I've seen him be drafted. That's all I'm saying. I've seen him get drafted in 4-round rookie drafts. It's happened. I've seen it.
Play in
And
better leagues. No, I'm just kidding. What do you think of CJ Johnson?
yeah, I think that I think my comp actually for him was Laviska Chenault because the physicality. He's got a very, I believe, if I'm misremembering, maybe I'm misremembering, but I think he started out as a running back. And when you watch him on tape, he's got a very thick base, but I don't know, the explosions aren't there. And he is sitting high in the sleeper ADP. So if you're somebody that you get into a sleeper draft and you're just kind of looking at the rookie module and maybe you just grab him because you're not quite sure what's going on, I just wanted to put him on there, just make sure to tell people don't do that.
Yeah, he's also going to be a guy that analytics folks like. He was a receiver his freshman year, and he had an 18-year-old breakout age. I do remember that when I was putting together his production grade in my system. So he's been on certain people's radars. I would keep him off of yours out there, listeners, because while I think that there's a chance that he makes an NFL roster, I think that's probably close to his ceiling. Is he'll be there. He's got some tools. He's a big physical guy, like Jeff said. He does have a wide base, and I think in a certain scenario where he has to step in for the 5 guys that got hurt ahead of him, that would be a nice investment. But you're banking on a lot of ifs and what a lot of hypotheticals, I guess, to make him relevant.
I think he should play tight end. I know he's short, but I think he's so strong. I think he could play he'd be an undersized tight end. Why not? Why not
Darren
just roll out
Waller?
there? Yeah,
Darren Waller's kind of tall though.
He's a little taller than that, but yeah, I mean, just in general speaking, I think CJ could kind of do that if he wants to kind of break out. Because I don't think as a wide receiver he's going to be that relevant. I liked him though at ECU. He was good. Remember, and he just disappeared last year.
Mm-hmm. He came back strong-ish this year, though. I mean, they were also televised a little bit more. Shout out Holton Ahlers. I think he's also in the draft, but by default,
motion in the draft.
By default, he's just there because he ran out of years. Yeah,
he plays 6 years, baby. All right, let's go to our tight end, Dalton Kincaid. Underrated, overrated, properly rated. It kind of depends. I know Dalton's your tight end one, right, Jeff?
He is my tight end one, and I think he's underrated because he is my tight end one, and he is moving up. He's catching more buzz. Daniel Jeremiah just dropped a mock and had him going 15 overall to the Packers, and I think that this is one of those things through the process of I said a couple weeks ago that he's my tight end one over Mayer, and everybody thought I was insane, and now it's starting to get a little bit more throughout there that, hey, maybe he should be tight end one because maybe in fantasy he is a better option than Michael Mayer, and this is how we break the consensus and we make our own consensus, and I think the tide is turning a little bit on that, and he's catching that buzz, and again, Daniel Jeremiah certainly raises that profile a little bit, dropping that piece of content. And just the conversations around him, I don't think it would be entirely shocking to see him as the first tight end off the board. And I think for fantasy, he's clearly a better option than Michael Mayer.
Yeah, I've had some deep thoughts about my fantasy ranking of these guys recently because Mayer's going to stay my tight end one in my grading scale. But my grading scale doesn't necessarily take into account usage or projected scheme or projected role within a team. While I do think that Michael Mayer has a more diverse set of skills, I remember tweeting out the first time I studied Dalton Kincaid is, wow, this kid is way more well-rounded than I expected. What I expected to see was just a pass-catching tight end. He is much more than that. And when you have a guy that can kind of get you a guy that can do both, that leaves them on the field a little bit more. That doesn't limit them to maybe being that possession tight end 2 type of guy that's going to go out and catch passes like the Dallas Goedert to the Zach Ertz. I think Dalton Kincaid can be the Dallas Goedert on the Eagles this year. I think that, he has the ability to end up a top 6 or 7 dynasty tight end pretty quickly too, because he's very ready to go. There may be a flip in my rankings here because Jeff planted that like 3 weeks ago whenever the rookie guy dropped, and I can't shake it. I kind of think Kincaid should be consensus tight end 1, honestly.
So here's the argument I have with Mayer. Like, Mayer is pretty much what we know he's going to be like, so if you look at everything, so his like yards per route run, his yards per route is catch, it's like 8 yards and then 5 yards after catch, and it's 13 yards. This dude just catches balls and gets first downs. That's Michael Mayer. Like, he's going to do that, the possession guy all day. I don't think he has the 20-yard, 30-yard gains down the field like Kincaid's probably going to have. So, like, I think it comes down to, like, to me, so like we did this today. Me and Jay Stein were talking about this when we were doing an analytical breakdown. They were talking about Michael Mayer. It's like he's kind of like a slower Mark Andrews. Mayer is like this guy who's just going to catch a ton of balls, probably going to be great in the red zone. He's a really good blocker. He's going to be on the field all the time, but we don't necessarily know how much the volume is going to come from. So, like, and we don't know how much he's going to get, but he's going to catch balls. So from PPR standpoint, I think Mayer is going to be there. Kincaid is that upside play, right? But then you can also knock Kincaid a little bit. Like, you can talk about Kincaid being, hey, he kind of broke out. He hasn't played that many years. 2017 was his first year playing football. 2018, he was in college for 5 years. He only really broke out this year when they had injuries at the tight end position. Brant Kuthi, I don't know how to say his name, but he was out. Like, there are some things to knock a little bit, but I really think it's just going to come down to where they find themselves. Like, if Mayer goes someplace where he's probably going to be the second target getter, okay, I'm okay with that. Kincaid maybe could like separate himself. If he's that second guy that's going to be second leading target getter on his roster, then that'd be okay with Kincaid. But I think it's close. I don't think it's surefire 1 and 2.
Does slower Mark Andrews get open in the NFL? And
it's a valid question.
Well,
I don't know, but Mayer could catch.
Yeah, but if you look at a lot of the elite tight end options in the NFL, yards after catch is kind of secretly a big deal at the tight end position, especially in fantasy. And a lot of the guys that end up towards the top are excellent at yards after catch. You watch Travis Kelce, he's able to get open quickly, but then he does something with the ball afterwards. We know George Kittle certainly does something with the ball afterwards. I'm not sure Mayer's got that in his game at the NFL level, because I watched him against Ohio State and I didn't see that in his game against Ohio State. And we know how that porous that defense ended up being. So I just see Kincaid as that player that has those translatable skills that turn into high-end fantasy production.
So this year in college football, Mayer was tied in 1 for yards per route run, but then he was tied in 88 for yards after the catch.
Yeah.
So that's the thing you got to look at. But against zone, so his grade against zone, he was second in college football, but Kincaid was 1. And then against man, he was 4th though. So against man, he was 4th in college football, his receiving grade versus man, and Kincaid is 16th. So there is some, like, it's interesting kind of how his profile kind of stacks up. But you're not wrong about the Mark Andrews thing. I do think that Kincaid does have that athleticism. So no, I think he's probably rated though. I wouldn't say he's underrated, but you will, because you're a Kincaid guy. That's all right.
Yeah, that's fair.
All right. Last guy, we're going to talk about this guy because Jeff wants to talk about it. Michael Wilson, Jeff's guy. We're just going to say Jeff's guy. Jeff was told not to talk about this guy, but now we have to. So what do you think of Michael Wilson?
So Michael Wilson stands out. Michael Wilson was one of those that, if you watch a lot of players and you can't kind of get deep into the weeds, and I was around wide receiver 40 or so of my watch, and certainly all the elite guys had already been knocked out. And then Michael Wilson came across, and I was like, holy cow, what do we got here? And it's one of those that if you watch a lot of film, watch a lot of players, occasionally you will find that later guy and it'll make you sit up in your chair and say, well, this is different than what I've been watching. And then we saw his performance at the Senior Bowl, and you could see on film the route running prowess was there, and he looked very strong as a technical receiver. At the Senior Bowl, what he showed, the athleticism is there too. And so you start to build these pieces, and yeah, the production profile wasn't there. He was hurt through a lot of college, and Stanford was a difficult breeding ground for fantasy production or anything much wise in football. But we saw that athleticism kind of pop at the Senior Bowl to go along with those technical skills. And I think that he's a player that Jim Nagy was tweeting about him this week, going from kind of before the Senior Bowl being that day 3, that 5th round guy, and potentially with that performance moving up to be a day 2 receiver, a 3rd round receiver. And I mean, he goes in the second, he's a day 2 receiver. You got to sit up straight a little bit there and pay a little bit more attention.
Man, the medicals are more important than anything with him because I think you're right. I think in watching his game, I have very limited questions, and I think more football would have answered those questions, but we just simply didn't get more football. Um, Very explosive kid. He's more refined with his release packages and his routes than I anticipated, despite not playing a ton of football. He was a very high recruit. He walked on to Stanford, and each year he was there almost. I he was the number one wide receiver. He just never had the opportunity to really show anyone that. So I'm intrigued by him, but I just don't think the medicals are going to allow him to creep that high in the draft. And so, I think it probably is still underrated because people just don't know this name.
He's not being drafted. He has
Right.
not been drafted in any rookie drafts I've done in the last 6 days, 7 days. So he's not getting drafted there. So of course you're gonna say he's underrated. He's not getting drafted. I mean, there's some guys getting drafted. I'm like,
He should be though.
Like, I don't know.
Over CJ Johnson.
Yeah, I was gonna say who's getting really drafted high, and I don't want to be a dick, but Charlie Jones is getting drafted pretty high in some of these things, and I don't see Charlie Jones he got drafted in the 3rd round, like late 3rd, and I don't see that at all. Like I would like Wilson to me is better value than Charlie Jones, so that's kind of where we're looking at. Well, that is our overrated, underrated kind of segment, talking about some guys that you should be aware of. Like, hey, if you're in best balls, if you're drafting and those type of things, you're in drafts right now, who you could be looking at, where the value's at. So hopefully, as we get into it, we'll start kind of going over that and see where their value shifts and guys that you should be looking at. So we are going to jump into games now, going to go through the games, have a little fun here to wrap up the show and talk about a little XFL.
Yes, so the sportsbook rundown this week, we all went 3-2. I don't even know how that happens, but we're all splitting the first chip here on this first game, and we're going to pick the 4 XFL games. Once again, really quickly on the XFL, fantastic football, very awesome rule changes or rule modifications from the NFL. I was very enthralled while watching. I think Saturday night I was watching a game, one of the nights, but just a very good brand of football with a lot of talented football players. Like hearing Josh Gordon's name, awesome. Enjoyed that as a former Browns fan. So, okay, first game, Seattle versus St. Louis. Kevin, where are you going?
Yeah, give me Seattle. AJ McCarron's not good.
Yeah, Jeff?
I'm going to go down with the Fighting AJ McCarrons. I'm going to take St. Louis here. They won last week, and I think that they keep it rolling.
Yeah, I'm going to go Seattle. I think I picked Seattle last week, and they kind of disappointed. If I recall correctly, I can't remember who won these games. We need to put records in here when we're doing these. That's on me. But Seattle's got a good football team, and I think they bounce back this week. Next one, DC versus Vegas. Jeff, where are you going?
DC looked very strong last week. Vegas struggled. I'm going to go with DC over Vegas here.
I am as well. Kevin?
DC, baby. That's my team. I'm a DC defender till I die.
Great. That's fantastic stuff. Next one, San Antonio versus Orlando. Orlando got absolutely destroyed last week, so I'm going to go San Antonio. Kevin, where are you going?
Yeah, San Antonio. Orlando is the worst team in the XFL. I said that last week.
Yep.
San Antonio, because Orlando is the worst team in the XFL, and Kevin said that last week.
Just trying to help you guys out here.
Yes, thank you. Last game, Arlington versus Houston. Kevin, you're first.
You know what? Give me Houston.
Okay, Jeff?
Houston's got a strong defense. I'm going to go with Houston.
Hey, you don't know that.
If they have a strong defense, I'm taking them. Houston.
He doesn't know that. He has no idea. He's doing the Stu Gatz thing from the Lebertard show, where you just act like you know what you're talking about and be confident. That's literally what he's doing there.
How many points were scored on Houston last week? It looks as though
15 probably.
No, 12, but it was against Orlando, who we have established as the worst team. I'm taking Arlington to be different.
Number one defense in the league.
That's true. Yeah. All right. That'll do it for the sportsbook rundown this week.
All right, let's go over. We're going to do a little prospect poker. So we're going to do XFL props. We have props now. Hey, it's way better than last year. At least we are diving into like actual football here. And to Christian's credit, the XFL was actually kind of fun. Jeff's got to give it a chance. All right, so when we're going over prospect poker, we're going to play poker on the screen. If you're listening, we're going to go through some props. Jeff is 5-3. I am 4-4. Christian's 6-2. Christian's crushing these props. So we're going to give you over-unders on the XFL props.
Yep, and I'm going to go first, and my over is Josh Gordon over 55.5 receiving yards. He caught a touchdown last week. I anticipate another big game as Josh Gordon kind of reinvigorates his potential NFL career. Maybe he's back again next year.
All right, so we've got a 4 of clubs, we have an ace of hearts, and we have an ace of spade or ace of diamonds and a queen of hearts.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't know. I think I'm having an aneurysm on screen right now. And then a 4 of hearts for Christian. So my choice is going to be Ben DiNucci, the fighting Ben DiNucci. He's going over 205.5 passing yards, and totals were a little bit lower last week in the XFL, but I'll take DiNucci hitting 205 passing yards. He looked like he was the best quarterback in the league. So I have a queen of clubs. Queen of clubs.
You suck. I'm gonna go Austin Prohl. I think that's how you say his last. I don't know. I'm gonna say over 30. What?
He's former Bill.
Thanks. I really needed that little bit of information there. Austin Prohl over 35.5 receiving yards. I just like him. He's a spunky little slot receiver. So kind of reminds me of Cole Beasley.
8 of clubs. Cole Beasley is also a former Bill.
We know.
Yep. All right. My under this week is Brian Hill under 40.5 rushing yards. I just don't think Brian Hill's very good. So that's my analysis there.
All right. A queen of spades, which is good for Christian because he's got 2 pair. Brian Hill, former Falcon. I'm going to go Marcel Aitman under 40.5 yards. Marcel Aitman from Oklahoma State under that number 40.5 yards. And I've got a 7 of hearts. We're just losing our minds here tonight.
All right. I'm gonna take Brian Hill, but I'm also taking him in. I'm doing under 12.5 receiving yards. And for the main fact that I don't think he's very good.
Still former Falcon. Ace of hearts. Christian won this game. That means we go to the last game. The last game that we play is trivia. We play blackjack, we play trivia, and that's how we end up our show. So Christian is going to start us off with a 15. Kevin has
21.
20. And I have not blackjack. 17. So Christian is first up.
I got a question.
Okay. All right.
It's XFL. Just keeping the theme. Christian, over under pass attempts for Ben DiNucci in his first game. 48. Was it over or under that?
Over.
It was 54 pass attempts for Ben DiNucci. Good job.
I think I knew that.
21.
21.
Look at that.
Means Christian wins the show.
Yeah, we've got some time. If I have more random trivia questions
for me. Yeah.
Let me pick one. It's kind of on brand here. Which singer's real name is Robin Fenty?
Which singer's real name is Robin Fenty? Rihanna?
Yeah.
Right.
She's got her Fenty line of makeup, I think.
Okay, I busted.
All right.
I wasn't aware there was a Fenty line of makeup. You learn new things every day with this show.
Mostly about makeup, not football.
Yeah, let's see.
Haters are excited.
Okay. Yeah, haters are going to hate. Who is leading the XFL in rushing yardage?
It's Kalen Ballage, isn't it?
It is Kalen Ballage.
Oh, I know my XFL, baby.
You busted anyways.
I busted. That's
Christian
great.
wins.
That's awesome.
All right.
Christian. Good job, Christian. Proud of you.
Yeah, this is a couple, wins over the last few weeks, I feel like. I don't have a whole lot to talk about. I did want to remind everyone, we are available on all the major podcast platforms too. I feel like we don't do a great job of reminding people where you can find us. So if you found us on YouTube, but you prefer to just listen to the audio version, we are on your favorite podcast platform. We'd also, if you guys can go drop an Apple review or or drop a review on the podcast. That would definitely help us in those charts and get us in front of more people. So we would appreciate that. We appreciate everyone watching and listening as always. Oh, yeah.
You can tell he's done that before.
All right. Well, we appreciate you guys. We'll be back March 1st, getting you guys ready for the combine, looking at that. Again, looking at go watch our last video. We've talked about tiers, where the tiers are, overrated prospects. We're getting you ready for your mock drafts and your real drafts and your dynasty stuff. Go download the rookie guide. If you haven't already, what the hell are you waiting for? Go down. It's free. Who doesn't like free? And it's free stuff with 120 profiles. There's nothing else like it. And I can confidently say that. So go download it. We'll be back next week, March 1st, 9 p.m. Eastern. Until then, I'm Kevin Coleman.
I'm Jeff Bell.
And I'm Christian Williams, and you just watched the Football Guys College Football Show.